Good evening. How do you go about building an Olympic mountain bike course? Nobody's better qualified to speak about this topic than my guest tonight, Nick Floros, designer and builder of the Olympic mountain bike course for the Tokyo Olympics. Nick has built courses for Rio Olympics, Tokyo Olympics, World Championships Marathon, World Championships Cross Country, several World Cups, and national mountain bike courses. If you want to find out how do you go about building a mountain bike course, stay tuned. Good evening, Nick, and welcome to this chat that we've set up to talk about what it takes to build an Olympic mountain biking course, something which sounds very exciting and quite an experience. And we'd be keen to hear from you. So give us a bit of background about how does one get involved with setting up a mountain bike course for the Olympic Games? Where did it start?
So you'd have to backtrack a bit. Obviously, I was involved in the 2016 Olympics in Rio. And in order to have been involved in that, you sort of like need to look 2 years prior to that when the tender process opened. And then the connections that I'd acquired through the World Cup and the World Champs that were held in Pietermaritzburg led me down the line to sort of knowing who the people were to contact and sort of how to go about tendering on the game. So it was something that I'd learned through having been involved with the World Cups in Pietermaritzburg.
Right. So what I hear you say is there's actually a tender process. This is not like you get a phone call from the president of World Cycling and says, Nick, do you want to build a course? You have to pitch for this.
Yeah. So every country is different, and it comes down to what the country law is and how it's set up. So in Rio, there needed to be 3 companies that tendered on the work. You obviously don't know who the other companies are, and I think it's very similar to type of tenders we have here in South Africa. The tender for Tokyo was a bit different in that we tendered on it. We didn't know who the other people were. We never ever got told at a later stage who they were. So it was quite a blind way of doing a tender process the second time around. The first time, with Rio, we got to know who the people that tendered on it after we had won the tender. But yeah, it's, I'm not too sure how it's going to be for Paris, but I'd imagine that Paris will also have its different quirks in this tender process. Yeah.
So you submitted the tender for Tokyo, and then obviously at some point you get the phone call that says, Nick, congratulations, you're building an Olympic course. When did this happen?
So Tokyo, it was, we got the call in beginning of 2017. So it was just after Rio. There's a short gap, and then, the tender process opened, and it was, halfway through 2017, we got the call to say that we had been nominated as the winning candidate. Yeah.
Well, congratulations in retrospect again. So that leaves you like 3 years to prepare.
So it sounds like a long period of time, but when you break it down, there's a test event that has to happen, and that happens a year before games,
right? So
that the athletes can have a similar, weather conditions and climate to what it's going to be like for games. So that happens a year before, and then construction normally takes between 6 and 7 months. And I know this sounds like quite a bit of time, but when it comes, because of the challenges that are thrown at us during the construction phase, 6 to 7 months is pretty tight going. And it was certainly a hell of a tight when it came to Tokyo. Weather conditions, training staff up, dealing with bits and pieces of like politics and, that type of stuff. So yeah, before you know it, 3 years is come and gone.
Yeah.
So it's not a hell of a lot of time, to be honest.
So Nick, when you, obviously, I was going to ask you, what is the brief or the specification that you're given, but I guess that's that's done taken care of in the tender process. They give you, or not, or when you kind of get the spec first time that says it needs to be difficult, it needs to be lots of drops and rocks and this or that, or
No.
do you figure all that out?
Yeah. So that's the interesting part, is that if you look at the UCI rulebook, there are parameters in which a course needs to be built. Things like, the start straight has to be 8 meters wide for the first 100 meters. The finish straight has to be 8 meters wide for the last 75. There has to be a double tech feed zone. So they're guidelines. But as far as the features, the technicality, the amount of people, the amount of climbing per lap, or the way in which that climbing is delivered, is it in one long climb? Is it in multiple short climbs? That's really left up to my discretion and my experience. So for the UCI, who are obviously the international governing body, they put quite a bit of faith in my skill and my experience, and that gets tested at the test event, which is a year before games time.
Right.
So yeah, in the tender process, obviously the fact that we've got so much experience, or I've got so much experience, it helps a lot. There's also a basic conceptual drawing that we submit. So we submit plans, quantities, we submit, quantities of materials, and we submit this whole, what do you want to call it?
Like a bill of materials and a plan. And
yeah, no, but like it's a whole jigsaw puzzle that they put together, and they go, cool, all right, that's what we need to put on the games. So yeah, there's quite a bit behind the scenes that happens. And yeah, I'm not going to go into too much detail, because yeah, there is a bit of a restriction on what I can say and what I can't say. So yeah, I'll try and be as detailed as possible. So I do apologize about that.
No, that's no problem. So so when you start working, when did you see the site for the first time? Or
so
did you need to see the site before you start building, planning?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So part of the tender process is actually to fly out there at your own cost, and go and have a look at the site. So we as the people tendering on the work, don't get to choose or influence in any way where the games is hosted. So we get taken to a site, and they say, this is what you've got to use. And then you ask as many questions as you want, and you try and push the boundaries, and you try and get a really good understanding of, what you can use. And I must admit, in 2017, when I went to Tokyo, so get there, drive out to the venue, and we walked around the site. There's actually a tar road that goes around the site. And I couldn't believe that was all they wanted me to use. It was 450 meters long by approximately 150 meters wide on average. Wow. And I was like, you want us to fit 4 kilometers of trail into this space?
That's like 4 rugby fields.
No, it's minute. The footprint is honestly minute. So fortunately, what was in favor is that it had different types of vegetation. So it had an open area, it had a wooded section, it had like a bush section. So that gave I think the spectators and the riders the sense of, going somewhere. And I think as mountain bikers, we all like that sense of going somewhere. The last thing we want to be feeling is that, we're feeling as if we're riding around in circles. So
yes,
yeah, it was extremely challenging course to design. It was, but in hindsight, when I look back, it was perfect. The spectators could see riders in 3 or 4 different places without having to take a single step. So from a spectator point of view, it is actually, in my honest opinion, it's the course of the future. That's how cross-country courses should be.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, from a television perspective, there's no ways that I was able to tell it was that tight. Couldn't say.
That's interesting, because there was actually a helicopter flying around, and at the event I looked up and I thought, there's actually no need for a helicopter to be flying around this 450-meter long strip. It was extremely amusing. Yeah,
that's very interesting. So you've got this piece of land, and how do you start? I mean, you've mentioned that you've got the guidelines from the UCI for the start, finish, etc. Do you start by drawing the features, or are the features already there? You just enhance them?
No. So with Tokyo, there were literally 5 rocks, and I think I've got a photo somewhere of these 5 rocks that were in that area. Other than that, none of those rocks were on site. They were all brought from about 15 k's away.
Right.
So like I said earlier on, there are a couple of boxes that you need to tick: the start finish straight, the feed tech zone. You obviously, it needs to be between 4 and 6 kilometers. A lap time, the UCI wants a lap time between like 11 minutes and 12 and a half minutes. So that's something you need to keep in mind. And then you just sit down and you start brainstorming, and you do layouts. And I think this was the 9th or 10th layout that I'd done. And it needs to have certain criteria that it ticks. So yeah, once you've got that layout right, then you do a second site visit, and you literally go like most trail builders do, and you go through the bush and you go looking for natural features to see if there are any roots, or if there are any rocks, or if there's any off-camber sections, or if there are any gullies, or any like interesting things, ponds, dams, waterfalls, whatever, just to sort of bring some of the environment into the spectator side or the TV side. So yeah, it's a combination of sitting down and just sort of doing brainstorming and doing layouts, and then going through the bush. And then once you've got a good feeling and a good understanding of what is there, then you start drawing the features. Yeah. So the features are done on the second site visit, but it's done at the end of the second site visit. Yeah.
So do you have any idea how much you needed to transport in terms of wood and rocks and soil and whatever? Was it like 1 million cubic meters, or 10 or 5 rocks, or 1 million rocks? And it must have been a lot that you brought in.
So roughly 1,200 cubes of rock. So like all the rocks that you see on the side of the course, those peripheral rocks, those were also brought in to make the course look more natural. We get told where to put the course on, where the race is going to be hosted. Me personally, I prefer naturally enhanced trails. Trails that you go and find natural features and you make them rideable. Those to me are the most genuine mountain bike trails.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, as a designer, we don't have that luxury. We get told it is here and make it look as good as possible. So yeah, that's why we bring in so many rocks. Logs, we brought in a number of logs. We brought in a hell of a lot of retaining walls. I don't know if there were any camera shots of it, but there was log retaining walls that were installed just to make space between the tar circuit, because there's a road racing circuit there, and the edge of the forest. We needed to create these spaces. So there was a lot of soil moved around, but yeah, I couldn't give you exact figures on the amount of soil that moved around. But yeah, if like an interesting thing, machinery, loads of machinery. I think at one stage we had 8 excavators working simultaneously in one day. So it's what you see on TV. If it looked natural and if it looked like there was no work done, well, then we've done our job right. But I can tell you that there was an old BMX track that we had to flatten and reshape, and that was that Cosmos section. So there's a hell of a lot of man hours that go into a project like this.
So it was a construction site for a period of time. Were you there for most of that construction time?
Yeah. So I was there for 155 days of the construction. Yeah. So I was there for most of it. So every now and then I'd come home, but yeah, I was there more in Japan than I was at home that year.
So does that mean that you've learned a bit of Japanese, Nick?
No, I've taught a lot of Japanese people to speak English.
So Nick, then it comes to, so now you've constructed the course, and someone, I guess, at some point has got to put some wheels on it to see if it works or not. Were you that person, or did you, I mean, this is before the test event. Were you that person? Did you start riding it and then you check if it's working? Did you have some local mountain bikers that were helping you do that? How does that sort of riding it in, checking it out, how does that work?
So Tim Keep, a friend of mine, came from here. You know, with being away from home so much, I just needed someone to assist if I got sick or if there's an issue that, you know, could carry on with the project. I found with Rio that I was the sole person that knew how everything was meant to fit together. And on one or two occasions I got sick, and I was like, you know what, I don't have an option but to go there. So I found it to be to my detriment. So this time around, I took someone with me. Tim's got a wealth of knowledge. He's been involved in mountain biking for, you know, decades. So the nice thing about our working relationship is that he doesn't always agree with me. So I get to see things through other people's eyes, you know, and it's not just me forging ahead with my own idea and going, this is the only way, this is right. So we got a really good working relationship like that. Coming back to the testing of the course, I've always said, if you're a trail builder and you don't ride your own trails, well, then maybe you need to go and find another occupation, or you need to go and find another hobby, because I've seen it in too many instances where guys have tried to build stuff and they've built outside their skill set, and it's ended in disaster or costing a hell of a lot of money to rectify those issues. So your question, I test everything. The day I can't ride something that I build is the day I hang up my spade. Yeah.
So Nick, just out of, are you prepared to share how long it took you to get around that course? You said that the time was like 11 to 12 minutes. How long did it take you to get around the course?
So I pride myself in being technically competent, but I'm not. I mean, I'm a big guy. I'm 6 foot 2.5, and I'm 100 kg. So I think with saying that, I don't feel too ashamed to say that it took me 18.5 minutes to get around. Yeah.
I mean, and I can assure you, an accomplished mountain biker. And what was the fastest lap at Tokyo? Do you know, off the top of your head?
I would be lying if I gave you the exact time. I apologize. Yeah, I don't know the exact time.
I wonder. I mean, if it's 12 minutes, that's an 18. It's incredible. That's like 3 laps. Then, and as I say, it's not like you're an accomplished mountain biker. It just creates perspective in terms of how fast those top guys go.
Yeah. Yeah, so for games time, part of our contract was to supply the lead motorbike rider, and the person that I took over is Bradley Cox, and he's a very accomplished motorbike rider. And I kept on saying to him, Brad, just these guys are super fast. It is, when they take off, it is like superhuman. You just have to make sure you stay ahead of them and don't mess up. And yeah, I mean, he agreed that riding in front of the guys, they are extremely fast. It's something that you need to attend a World Cup to understand how supernatural it really is.
Yeah.
Especially off the start straight, when the guys take off and they go past you, and then all of a sudden there's this gust of wind that follows them, and you realize, you know, that there's quite a bit of energy that's exerted off that start.
So how many laps did you end up doing of the Tokyo course? It must have been plenty.
Yeah, so part of it was, I mean, we'd often ride sections, ride the first half, or go and ride a rock feature, or if there's something bugging us, we would go and ride it. And coming back to that whole riding the course thing was, up until 2 weeks prior to the test event, I'd ridden it, and I was like, there just wasn't something right. You know, there's with the layout, it just wasn't 100% right. So I had to call a meeting, and I called a meeting with the UCI were on the phone, and Tokyo 2020 were on the phone, and the Tokyo 2020 was actually there. And I said to them, listen, I've made a bit of a blunder. I think the riders are going to be exerting too much energy or pushing into the red coming up to that Van der Poel's drop, and we actually gave the riders more recovery coming into that drop to make it safer. So yeah, I had to put my pride in my pocket and sort of say to the guys, listen, yeah, it wasn't a very costly mistake. I literally did it myself, and we changed the I changed the layout, and it definitely made coming into that drop a lot safer. So yeah, you ride it enough to get a very good feeling of exactly how the course rides in every single section. You need to know it like the back of your hand. Yeah.
I was going to ask you a question about how much the course changed, and you've actually answered that partially, but let's get to that. When it comes to testing, you've started touching on the testing side. So all of this leads up, and then you think you're good to go, and you have the big test event, which was 2019, if I recall.
Correct.
How did that go? And I
Yes.
mean, we all know the test event took place and saw clips of it, but what was the feedback after that? Do the riders, they obviously ride it a bit, test it, and then race it, and then all that time you're getting feedback from them in terms of whether it works okay? What are you expecting from? What are you asking those? What are you expecting them to tell you? Like it's too easy or too hard? Or...
So no. It's actually it's more around the safety of the course. So the safety of the course and how long it's taking riders to do a lap, because the time it takes a rider to do a lap obviously has implications on the end of the TV coverage. So if the race happened for too long, let's say it happened for an hour and 40 minutes, they need to know that they need to set aside an hour and 40 minutes. If it's going to be an hour and 20 minutes, well, then they set aside an hour and 20 minutes. You can't go, well, it's going to be an hour and 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden they run into an hour 35, because from a TV perspective, that's a bit of a stuff up. So, so one of the biggest things is lap times, safety, and then other things like bottlenecking, just the general flow of the course, what points of the course need to be filmed in what way. So we have quite a big interaction with still photographers as well as TV and where their positions are going to be. So, OBS, which is the Olympic Broadcasting Services, they're there and they're just going around and they're trying to look at different angles and they're trying to work out how to promote the sport in the best light. So there's that. But, things that we do get back from riders is, it's either too hard, it's too rough, maybe a berm doesn't work exactly how it is designed to work, corners getting blown out. So it's just fine tuning the design. When you go through the tender process, one of the questions they ask you is, how much is the course going to change between test event and games time? Because obviously if it's going to have a big change, it's going to have quite a big financial, a negative financial thing to it. Yeah. So, so that's, and you also need to understand that if a team manager or a rider comes to you and says, oh, it's way technical, you need to see what strengths their riders have or do not have. So if a team manager comes to me and says, oh no, the hills are way too steep and they're too punchy, and I'll look at their riders and go, well, your riders are larger, they don't really suit that type of thing. So you're trying to get us to change to suit your rider. So you have to have a good understanding of the athletes, the team managers, and they're definitely team managers that they'll come to you and they'll have a non-biased sort of chirp about the course or a comment on the course, or so there's a lot that happens during test event
And how much did you have to change after the test event?
So the lap times were a bit long, so we needed to lose 30 seconds. So we took out a portion of the course, and the actual course was 3.85 kilometers in length. So it was actually below UCI spec, but the UCI were happy with us changing it, and it was ultimately their call on making it shorter time-wise, and they also knew there was going to be our spec. So there was that. There was also in the main rock garden, the first rock garden. So after the first climb, they went through a wooded section, and then there was the big rock garden that's got like a 3-meter roll down on it. Just before that, there's quite a big jump, drop, and it had a wheel catch in it. And I'd ridden it a number of times, and I went over the bars, and I was like, no, I went back, rode it, and it was fun. And then come race day, the men flew through it, and then the woman in their practice had a bit of issue. That's where Pauline went over the handlebars, and where Jenny Riswitz went over the handlebars. So yeah, we needed to sort out that rock garden. So we put in a rock there and made sure that it wasn't going to move. Other than that, there were minor things. Yeah, so I go as far as to say that we got it 99% right for test event.
And that's the benefit of experience, I guess, of many years of doing this.
Yeah, experience, and also, coming back to that testing and that repetitive testing, building something and riding it, and building it and riding it, and looking at all the options. And also, coming back to like having Tim there. So we have different strengths, and you see a competent rider go through something, and, sit down, discuss it, walk through every possible option, and from a safety point of view, from a skills point of view, it's like, yeah. So I definitely say it's more the testing than the experience.